Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Kris. This is Distressing Things from the Internet, Volume 5. Don't worry, I have not done them in order. It's just been randomly grabbing them when I see them. This is from Fright Factory. Click that thumbs up for me. That helps out tremendously. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like to. And you can donate to the channel through the thanks button. If you do, you request a video in the comments section. I give you a thumbs up, a heart, thank you. And then when I react to that video, your name is sponsoring that video. You can still request without the donation. You just don't get the shout out. All right, let's get into it.
The man you're looking at is about to experience one of the most brutally painful things the human body can ever go through. Not only that, just prior to this moment, he was given a poisonous agent that prevents him from being able to properly breathe or move his muscles. In other words, he was paralyzed. This gets a whole lot worse, but before we continue, I'm just going to explain who this man is and what led up to this moment. Rodolfo Soleil Hernandez was a 28-year-old man who lived in the Mexican municipality of Playa Vicente during the early to mid-1990s. Details of this man are incredibly scarce, but even if there were many details, I wouldn't give him the benefit of describing his life story because this man right here was both a depraved human being and a dangerous member of his community. On August 31st, 1996, a 46-year-old woman named Ana Borromeo did what she would do many other days and walked to a nearby river to wash some of her clothing. The trip was by all means standard. She would pass by a person or two that she knew, drop some garments and have to pick them up, but she eventually made it there without a hitch. What she didn't know, however, is that she was actually being stalked on her way over by a man who had been regularly watching her from afar. That man being Rodolfo Soleil Hernandez. As Anna arrived at the river with her clothing, Rodolfo saw his opportunity and jumped on her before violating her and committing unspeakable acts. Once he was done, he would take her life in cold blood by drowning her in the very river she was there just to wash her clothing in. The area in Mexico where this crime took place has a deep-rooted internal law where they chase criminals out or publicly execute them depending on the severity of their crimes. Vigilante justice became a popular concept there because the townspeople were not pleased with the performance of law enforcement. They were either slow or just negligent of their responsibilities altogether. Of course, there's major legal and ethical implications here, as everyone has the right to a fair trial, and they are, after all, murdering someone. However, in a case like this, there's obviously many layers to it. And that brings us back to where we started. Following the murder and discovery of Rodolfo's alleged guilt, the entire town got together and went to capture him. They took turns mercilessly beating him before stripping him down to his boxers and covering him head to toe in a flammable liquid. They also gave him a poisonous agent that causes paralysis known as curare to make sure he would not be able to escape. And you probably know what comes next. Rodolfo was tied to a tree and subsequently set on fire where he would burn alive in agonizing pain in front of the entire group, only being able to move his neck because of the poison and how tightly he was bound to the tree. This entire event was captured on video because people would often record these events and trade copies around town. It ended up spreading even further though because news stations got a hold of it and it created a huge nationwide frenzy. The scene in the video is very grim to say the least. There's a strange silence the entire time, there's kids in the background watching while smiling and laughing. It's more than clear that for many of them it was not their first time seeing something like this. And the craziest part to me is that this is all available to watch on YouTube. Of course, now that there was media attention, law enforcement would swoop in. 30 people, including the cameraman, ended up being charged with crimes of homicide and violation of burial laws. In the end, only 3 people would end up being sentenced to 19 years in prison, and those 3 people were the stepson, brother, and nephew of Ana Borromeo. So yeah, no one won in the end.
If that guy, and I'm not going to say he did it, but if he did it, vigilante justice. You know, it's not the greatest thing, but I completely understand it. Regardless of what happened to him, what happened to her is terrible. And if he did it, I don't have a problem with what they did. Don't have a problem at all with what they did. Unfortunately, yeah. That's what I was going to say. I feel bad that her family got charged, but I would understand. I'm sure that They went to jail for 19 years, and I'm sure that people in the jail are not messing with them at all. I think it's probably a, hey, I get it.
Developing news out of Tunica County. A 19-year-old is dead after drowning in a lake. Mother of a man who drowned in Tunica County Saturday says she wants to mourn in peace.
May 23rd, 2020 was like many other days for 19-year-old football player J.W. Ransom. He would go about his normal routine, and then at some point in the day when he was all finished up, he'd meet outside his apartment complex to hang around with his brothers and a couple of their other friends. As they hung out, the group would get a little more rowdy and start to screw around with each other a bit more, which is obviously completely normal for guys their age. However, at some point, JW's friends would make a bet with him, daring him to do something that would ultimately result in a heartbreaking, completely unavoidable tragedy. While hanging out, one of JW's friends would bet him to swim across the pond in front of their apartment complex, claiming that if he did it, they would make 2 free payments on a car for him, totaling around $1,500. It's unclear as to whether or not they would actually honor that deal, but as you'll soon see, that would be the least of their concerns. JW seemingly started to consider the offer, and just before this, some of the people in the group would start filming and further encouraging him to do it.
Please don't tell me there's like an alligator in that pond.
Another friend, rather than just filming, actually started live streaming on Facebook, and at some point afterwards, the full recap would eventually be uploaded to YouTube. From the beginning of the live stream, you could immediately tell he was very reluctant, even dipping his toes in the water, prompting him to realize how cold it was. While this happened, the cameraman would continually pressure him, calling him soft and doubting him. This same friend was also consistently encouraging the viewers to share the stream, indicating that internet clout and virality took precedence over Ransom's safety in that moment. And while you could just chalk it up to friends messing around, they really seemed to just be pushing JW into doing something that he didn't even want to do in the first place, calling him fat a series of times, demeaning him, and so on. The longer this went on, the more set JW was in the idea that he actually had to do it. He even asked, "If I die, who's gonna come get me?" To where a friend responded, "I'll come get you, bro. I can swim."
Come get me, bro.
I'll come and get you. Bro, I can swim, bro. I can swim, bro. If you drown, I'm gonna come and get you. Hey, on the G, if you drown, I'm gonna come and get you.
The pressure grew to a crazy point, and although it's easy to say it was completely his choice, it's a totally different situation when you're actually in his shoes. Throughout the video, you could see him approach the water and bail on it 3 to 4 different times. It's like he knew something bad was gonna happen. But with enough insults and enough money offered, he would eventually just go for it.
Oh yeah, he fat on. He walking. Swim. Nigga, you walking. You walking. Jay.
Shortly after he jumps in, he started swimming quickly and things seemed to be going okay. The first stretch was shallow water, and so even if he hadn't been swimming, his feet would touch the bottom of the pond. The cameraman then warns him that there's a drop-off coming up, sadly indicating that he knew this beforehand. And even worse, it turns out the drop-off was around 30 feet deep. So as JW steps into this deeper section, he would unfortunately struggle to swim and start screaming in complete agony and terror, emitting some of the most sickening cries for help that I've ever heard. All while his friends didn't believe him, insisting that he was just playing around.
Let go! Let go!
Hey, go up.
Soon after this, it was clear that one of his siblings realized something was terribly wrong. He started running to the other side of the pond, screaming at JW to kick his feet. This is the point in the live stream where everyone would finally realize it was an emergency situation, and things only got darker from there. Multiple people, namely both his brother and first responders, would try to save JW, but sadly their efforts would be futile. He would drown and pass away amidst the chaos, succumbing to the waters of the very pond he never even wanted to enter to begin with. According to many witnesses, once the livestream had ended, Jay's very own father, who's a firefighter himself, passed out in shock while his brother grabbed him. They would eventually be assisted by the DeSoto County Search and Rescue Team, where they would retrieve JW's lifeless body. The aftermath just makes his story that much more sad. His entire family, specifically his mother, were absolutely devastated. And just to make things that much worse, JW left behind a beautiful 7-month-old daughter who he absolutely adored. He was constantly working on getting himself into a better position from her, and from everything I heard, nobody had a single bad thing to say about him. He was known for being a very easygoing guy. Like any mother would be, Jay's mom was absolutely shattered. In her own words, she planned on burying him in her backyard just so she could visit him every single night. In a later interview, she would state, "I just want to hear his voice one more time." In the end, there was an incredible outpouring of love from the community, and they managed to raise nearly $16,000 for his family. And although this would never bring him back, it's reassuring to know so many people were willing to help.
Okay, sorry about that. I had to let my dogs out and then get some lunch. So I'm going to be sitting over here, kind of eating. All right, back to the video.
This next one is a relatively obscure Reddit post by a user named Culture Creature who finds out she has some rather insane neighbors. It was posted to r/askreddit over 12 years ago and is titled, "Reddit, I just found out one of my neighbor's adopted kids stabbed another kid to death and another attempted to murder her ex-husband. What are some precautions I can take for home security?" I'll read this through first and then we'll discuss it after. Hello Reddit. Me and my boyfriend just had a new neighbor move into a rural community. She's a woman who just left her husband and she has 2 adopted daughters and a son. About a week ago, our neighbor was served papers. Her husband is seeking full custody of the children. She briefly explained the situation when she came over to borrow a pair of scissors, and she is terrified that he's not going to be able to handle the children, and that her biggest concern was that someone was going to get hurt. I thought that the handle the children comment was really odd until today. I thought she meant in a single father way. I figured the ex would do just fine as a father alone if it came to that. However, I found out some details and now I don't think he can handle the situation and I'm freaked out as hell. We were taking out the trash at the same time and got to talking. After sitting and talking over coffee at her place for a while, she warned that if I ever saw her hugging her children in a bear hug and that they were screaming, not to be alarmed. They're really troubled former foster kids and they act out by punching, biting, kicking, and going for eyes. She explained that she's trained in therapeutic holds like restraints and that it looks really scary if you don't know what's going on. At this point, okay, whatever. I grew up with some incredibly violent children at my school and that doesn't faze me. She goes on to explain that the reason she thinks her husband can't handle the kids is because he has a nerve disorder. He can't grapple, he can't grab, and he can't push them off. This is a problem because the oldest daughter has attempted to murder him twice. Once by strangling him while he was napping and once with a garrote. She keeps talking and doesn't notice that I haven't swallowed my last sip of coffee because I've set my face like a steel mask so my eyes don't get as big as saucers. She warns not to let the middle daughter get under my skin. She doesn't get human emotions and creates lies and scenarios to manipulate adults. At the last normal school she went to, this is why she got expelled. She created a rift between teachers, spread lies about abuse, and basically wove a scenario that had 2 teachers believing the other was misconducting themselves with children. This isn't verbatim, but the gist of the segue that occurred next was, I'm so surprised she got expelled for lying after she killed another kid. I would have thought she would have gotten kicked out for violence. Apparently, the middle girl stabbed a kid to death in their sleep when she was first put into foster care at a group home. I don't know why she's not in juvie. I assume it's because she stabbed a kid to death when she was only like 8, but the husband wants the kids to feel normal while my neighbor wants the daughters to be in special programs. The son, to the best of my knowledge, isn't violent but is mildly and understandably emotionally disturbed. She continued on with tales of beatings and threats, stuff like, I'm gonna cut your head off, mama, and watch the blood run out of your throat. And
Sorry about that. I'm trying to fix the lighting because sometimes I leave, I come back, then I have to move the lighting around to readjust so I'm not phasing in and out.
how hard it is to have troubled kids. She explained that she doesn't want to lose weight because she needs it to be bigger than the kids, and it's getting harder to keep them from hurting each other as they get older. She explained that they are good kids when they aren't mad. After we said our goodbyes, I immediately went home and called my boyfriend. My boyfriend and I didn't lock our doors, close our windows, or shut our downstairs blind, but I've decided it's time to start. My neighbor stunned me with how collected she seemed. She's pursuing a PhD in childhood education and adoption sociology. She loves these kids and does seem to know how to handle them. I, however, am freaked out. There's something about a pair of sociopathic and violent children living next door that is really just not sitting well with me. I'm not sure what to do here. They're kids and I shouldn't be scared of them. Now, there's quite a bit going on here. This is 12 years ago now, meaning these children are currently adults and OP is likely long gone. But for the sake of their childhood trauma, I seriously hope they manage to achieve some real psychological help. Unfortunately, listening to the foster parents say that she doesn't experience human emotions makes that unlikely. It's highly obvious that this child is a psychopath and one who is prone to extreme violence. Obviously, I don't think OP should be all too concerned for herself, but rather the husband who this child has already attacked. As long as she locks her doors, as she said, I believe she's probably in the clear. But the husband's incapable of fighting back, and how the woman is allowing them to be in the same area together is beyond me. As for the legitimacy of this post, it's impossible to confirm, but I have little reason to doubt it. It was locked at 2 upvotes, and all the other posts she made were completely unrelated to this. She genuinely was seeking help and had appreciation for those who answered. This also wasn't exactly a time where people were farming Reddit for YouTube videos. Hearing that a child who murdered someone is out and walking around sounds like some BS at first, but you have to remember she's under the care of foster parents and likely spent a lot of time in some sort of psychiatric facility beforehand. We'll never know for sure, but this one was absolutely mental to read. As much as it is in no way their fault, I do think some children are beyond repair, but at the same time, there has to be someone out there to take care of them and give it a shot. I have a great deal of respect for the ones who do. The story ends there, as there was never any update following this post, or at least not on her Reddit page. That's going to do it for this one, guys. Thank you so
Yeah. There's no reason to continue with that kid. I mean, they killed someone. You almost need the kid from Shazam to be there to save other people. That's ridiculous. Wow. All right. Well, I apologize for coming in and out, but that's just ridiculous. Anyways, I'm going to end it here. Don't adopt a murderous child. That's, until next time, have a good day. Have a good night.